first weird thing was the trash can. I had already brought it back from the curb around noon, but when I looked out the kitchen window at 7:40 that evening, it was sitting at the curb again, turned sideways like somebody had dragged it there in a hurry. I was 24, working as a pharmacy tech in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, and I was staying at my aunt's house for the week while she recovered from knee surgery at my mom's place. I had never lived alone for more than a weekend before. I was trying to prove I could handle it, so I didn't call anybody over a trash can. My aunt's house was small and old, one story, with a detached garage in the back and a narrow side yard that led to the kitchen door. She had lived there since before I was born. She knew everybody on the block. I didn't. I was there to water her plants, feed her cat, and make sure nobody took packages off the porch. I was also sleeping there because I had just broken up with my boyfriend and didn't want to be at my apartment. My roommate and her boyfriend were always in the living room, laughing like life was easy, and I just wanted quiet. So when I saw the trash can out there again, I stood at the sink with a glass of water and stared at it for a while. The street was empty. A dog barked somewhere. Nothing else moved. I told myself the wind could have blown it. It was a big plastic can, but the wheels were bad, and it did sometimes roll crooked. So I went outside, grabbed it by the handle, and pulled it back up the driveway. Halfway back, I noticed the side gate was open. It was one of those chain-link gates that latched from the inside. It didn't swing open by itself. I knew that because the latch stuck, and you had to lift the whole gate up a little to close it. I stood there holding the trash can, looking at the gate. Then from the other side of the fence, a man said, "Hey." I almost dropped the can. He was standing on the sidewalk in front of the house next door. He looked maybe late 40s, thin, wearing jeans and a gray hoodie even though it was still warm. He had one hand raised like he didn't want to scare me. "Sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to make you jump." I gave a nervous laugh because I didn't know what else to do. "It's fine." He pointed toward my aunt's house. "Is Linda home?" "Linda is my aunt." I said, "No, she's not." He nodded. "She's still at her sister's?" I didn't answer right away. He smiled a little. "I used to mow for her. Name's Terry. She probably mentioned me." She had not mentioned a Terry, but my aunt had a whole life of church people, neighbors, handymen, and friends I didn't know about. I was already embarrassed that I had jumped like that, and I didn't want to be rude to someone she knew. "Oh," I said. "Yeah, she's recovering." "How's the knee?" "Better." He nodded again. His eyes went from me to the side gate, then to the kitchen window. "You staying here?" he asked. I hated that question, not because it was loud or aggressive, but because he said it like he already knew the answer. "For a couple days," I said. He looked down the street. "Good. Somebody should. People been stealing around here." I said, "Yeah, that's what she said." He took one step closer to the fence. "Make sure you lock that side door. Linda forgets." "I will." He smiled again. It didn't look fake. That was part of the problem. He looked like a tired guy trying to be helpful. "Tell her Terry said hey." "I will." I pulled the trash can fast the rest of the way up the driveway, went through the gate, and latched it. I checked it twice. Inside, I locked the kitchen door. Then I checked the front door and the back sliding door. Everything was locked. I felt silly, but I did it anyway. The cat, Daisy, was under the dining table, staring toward the kitchen. I ate microwave soup and watched a show on low volume. Around 9, I texted my aunt and asked if she knew a guy named Terry who used to mow for her. She didn't answer right away. She was on pain medication and slept early. At 9:30, the side yard light clicked on. It was motion activated. My aunt had told me it came on for possums all the time. I muted the TV and listened. Nothing. Then I heard the side gate rattle. Not swing open. Not bang in the wind. Rattle. Like someone lifted it against the latch. I stood up without thinking. Daisy ran down the hallway. I went to the kitchen window, but the blinds were closed. I put 2 fingers between the slats and looked out. The side yard was empty. The gate was still shut. The light stayed on for another 10 seconds, then clicked off. I waited. Nothing else happened. I checked my phone. No message from my aunt. I called my mom, but she didn't pick up. She worked nights at the hospital and kept her phone in a locker. I almost called my ex, and then I got mad at myself for even thinking about it. That was my weakness back then. I hated feeling alone so much that I would reach for anyone familiar, even someone who made me feel worse. So I didn't call him. I grabbed a chair from the dining room and wedged it under the kitchen door handle. It was dumb because the door opened inward and the chair worked. That made me feel better for about 5 minutes. At 10:06, my aunt texted back, "No Terry." "Why?" I read it twice. Then I typed, "A man said he used to mow for you." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. She wrote, "Don't open the door for him. Call Ron next door." Ron was the neighbor on the other side, the one with the big porch and the yard signs. My aunt had written his number on a paper stuck to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a tomato. I walked to the fridge, but as I reached for the paper, I heard something scrape at the back of the house. Not the side door, the back. It sounded like metal dragging over concrete. I froze. The back of my aunt's house had a small covered patio and a sliding glass door that led into the dining room. There was also an old dog door in the lower panel, beside it from a dog she had years ago. It was sealed with a plastic insert and 2 screws. The scraping came again. Slow. Careful. I crouched beside the counter, even though nobody could see me from the back because the curtains were closed. My phone buzzed in my hand. My aunt again. "Call Ron now." I dialed the number from the fridge paper. Ron answered on the 3rd ring. His voice was low and rough, like I had woken him. "Yeah. Hi, this is Jenna, Linda's niece. I'm staying at her house, and there's someone outside." He didn't ask a bunch of questions. "Where are you?" "In the kitchen." "Can you see him?" "No." I heard the gate, and now something at the back door. "Don't go to the door," he said. "Stay inside." I locked everything. "Good. I'm coming to my porch. Keep me on the phone." I heard him moving, then a door opening on his end. The scraping stopped. My aunt's house, was silent. Ron said, "I'm outside now." "I don't see nobody." I whispered. The side light went on earlier. "I'm looking." There was a pause. Then Ron said louder away from the phone, "Hey, you need something?" I held my breath. From outside, far enough away that I could barely hear it through the walls, a man's voice said something I couldn't make out. Ron said, "This isn't your house." Another pause. Ron came back to the phone. His voice changed. "Jenna, go to the front door. Don't open it yet. Just go there." "Why?" "Just do it." I stayed low and moved through the dining room, past the couch, into the front hall. My hands were shaking hard enough that I almost dropped the phone. Ron said, "There's a man in her backyard." I said, "What?" "He's walking toward the side gate now. I'm calling police on my wife's phone. Stay away from the kitchen." I looked down the hall toward the kitchen. The chair was still under the door handle. Then the chair moved. It didn't fall. It jumped, like pressure hit the other side of the door. Someone was trying the kitchen door from outside. I backed into the front hall closet door. My shoulder hit the knob. The handle on the kitchen door twisted. Once. Twice. Then a soft knock came from the other side. Not loud. Just 2 taps. I could see the door from where I stood. The window above the sink was dark except for the reflection of the little kitchen nightlight. Then the man spoke through the door. "Jenna." I almost made a sound. He said my name like we had already met more than once. Like we had plans. Ron's voice was in my ear. "Don't answer him." The man tried the handle again. Then he said, "Your aunt told me to check the water." I didn't move. He waited. "She told me you were here," he said. I could hear Ron breathing on the phone. The man knocked harder. "Jenna, open up." I whispered to Ron. He knows my name. Ron said, "Front door." "Now. Unlock it when I tell you." I heard a banging noise from outside, not at my door but from Ron's yard. He was yelling now. "Get away from there. Police are coming." The man at the kitchen door went quiet. For maybe 5 seconds, there was nothing. Then the side gate slammed. Ron said, "He's running toward the back." I was still at the front door. My fingers were on the deadbolt. Ron said, "Open. Run to my porch. Now." I opened the front door and ran barefoot across the lawn. I didn't look behind me. I heard my own breathing and Ron yelling, "Come on, come on." His wife, Marlene, was standing in their doorway in a robe, holding a phone. She grabbed my arm and pulled me inside so hard I hit the wall. Ron was on the porch with a baseball bat. He was in his 70s and wearing pajama pants, but he looked like he would have swung at anything that came near us. I turned around from inside their house and looked across the lawn. My aunt's side yard light was on again. For a second, I saw the man. He was standing near the detached garage in the backyard, half lit, half dark. He wasn't running anymore. He was just looking at Ron's house. Then he walked behind the garage and disappeared. The police came about 8 minutes later. I know it was 8 because I stared at the clock on Ron's microwave the entire time. It felt like an hour. They searched the yard and the garage. They didn't find him, but they did find enough. The dog door insert at the back of the house had been unscrewed and pulled halfway out. The screws were placed neatly on the patio table. Not dropped, placed. There were fresh scratches on the plastic, like he had been working on it with a flathead screwdriver. The kitchen door had marks around the lock. The officers said it looked like someone had tried a key first and then a tool. That bothered me because the door hadn't sounded forced at first. It had sounded like someone expected it to open. Then Ron pointed out something I didn't know about. My aunt kept a spare key in the detached garage, inside an old coffee can on a shelf. She had done it for years. Ron knew. My mom knew. A few neighbors knew. The coffee can was on the garage floor, empty. The side door key was missing. The officers asked my aunt over the phone about Terry. She was groggy, scared, and confused. She kept saying she didn't know any Terry. Then Ron said the man had been around before. He remembered seeing him 2 weeks earlier walking slowly down the alley behind the houses, looking into backyards. Ron had thought he was a utility worker because he carried a clipboard. He wasn't. The next morning, in daylight, everything looked worse. There were shoe prints in the soft dirt under the dining room window. The same kind of prints were under my aunt's bedroom window. The screen on her bathroom window had been lifted and put back wrong. There was a muddy handprint on the fence where someone had climbed over instead of using the gate. Marlene found something in her flower bed near the property line. It was one of my aunt's mail envelopes torn open. Not new mail. It was from the recycling bin. It had my aunt's name and address on it, and on the back someone had written my name in blue pen. Jenna Niece Stang. I felt sick when the officer showed it to me. I asked how he could know that. The answer was simple and worse than anything dramatic. He had probably watched. He could have seen my mom drop me off. He could have heard my aunt talk to Ron. He could have gone through the trash. He could have stood in the alley and learned the house. My aunt's neighborhood felt safe because everyone knew everyone. That also meant people talked in driveways. People left garage doors open. People hid spare keys in places that weren't really hidden. People assumed a man with a clipboard had a reason to be there. They never caught him. The stolen key didn't work after that because we changed every lock that afternoon. My mom picked me up and I stayed at her apartment for the rest of the week. My aunt cried when she came home and saw the back door. She kept apologizing like she had done something to me. For a while, I felt embarrassed about how I handled it. I kept thinking I should have called the police the second he asked about my aunt. I should have lied and said my husband was inside. I should have screamed. I should have done all kinds of things that sound easy when you're not standing in someone else's kitchen trying to decide if you're overreacting. But the truth is, nothing about him was dramatic at first. He didn't bang on the door right away. He didn't threaten me. He didn't wear a mask. He knew one real thing, said it calmly, and waited for me to fill in the rest. That was what scared me the most afterward. How normal it sounded. How close I came to opening the kitchen door just because someone used my name in a steady voice. I don't stay at houses alone anymore unless I know the locks, the exits, and who has keys. I don't answer questions through fences. I don't explain where people are or when they'll be back. If someone says they know my family, I still make them prove it. My aunt sold that house the next year. Ron and Marlene came to the closing. Ron hugged me and said, "You did fine, kid." Maybe I did. But I still think about the screws on that patio table. How careful he was. How much time he thought he had. A locked door only works if you treat it like a boundary, not a suggestion. The laundromat I used in 2021 had a broken front clock that always said 6:12, no matter what time it was. I remember staring at it on the night this happened because my phone was almost dead, and I didn't want to keep checking it. I was 29, living in Fresno, California, working 2 jobs, and I did laundry at night because it was cheaper to use the big machines once a week than pay for my apartment building's dryers that barely worked. I was tired, short on money, and used to ignoring weird people because most weird people are just tired too. Maple Wash was in a strip mall between a vape shop and a closed tax office. It was open until midnight. There were cameras in the corners, a change machine that ate dollar bills, and one employee, a woman named Rosa, who worked behind a little counter and sold detergent packets. I got there around 10:15 with 2 trash bags full of clothes. There were 3 other customers inside. A college-looking guy folding towels with headphones on, an older woman reading a magazine, and a man in a black jacket sitting near the vending machines with no laundry. The man looked up when I came in. Not in a dramatic way. Just a quick look. I put my clothes into 2 washers and bought detergent from Rosa because I had forgotten mine. She said, "Long night?" I said, "Always." She laughed, but she looked tired too. I sat at the folding table near the front windows. I liked that spot because I could see my car. It was an old Honda with a dented bumper, and I didn't trust the parking lot. The man by the vending machines got up and bought a bottle of water. Then he sat back down. He wasn't doing anything illegal. He wasn't bothering anybody. He could have been waiting for someone. That was what I thought. About 10 minutes later, he walked to the counter and asked Rosa for quarters. She said, "Machine's right there." He said, "It took my dollar." Rosa came around the counter and helped him. He stood too close to her while she opened the little panel on the machine. Not touching her, just close enough that I noticed. She gave him 4 quarters from the drawer and went back behind the counter. He didn't put clothes in a washer. He sat down again. The older woman left first. Her son or husband picked her up in a pickup truck. Then the college guy left around 10:50. I was alone except for Rosa and the man. My clothes had another 12 minutes. The man stood and walked slowly past the rows of machines. He looked into a couple of dryers like he was checking for clothes. Then he stopped near mine. I looked over. He didn't touch anything. He just looked at the washer window where my clothes were spinning. I said, "That one's mine." He turned his head and gave a little nod. "My bad." He walked away. I felt annoyed more than scared. I had been on my feet all day at a dental office, then at a grocery store bakery, and I just wanted clean scrubs and socks. I didn't have extra energy to make every strange person into a threat. Still, I moved my purse from the table to my lap. Rosa noticed. She looked from me to him, then back down at her phone. At 11:05, my washers ended. I moved everything into 2 dryers. The man was still there. I asked Rosa quietly, "Is he waiting on somebody?" She looked over. "He came in before you." "Did he have laundry?" "No." That made the room feel smaller. I said, "Maybe he's homeless." "Maybe," she said, "but he's been in twice this week." I didn't like that. The man looked up like he knew we were talking about him. Rosa smiled at him in that customer service way, not friendly, not rude. He smiled back. Then he asked, "Bathroom work?" Rosa said, "Customers only." He lifted one hand toward the empty washers. "I'm a customer. You don't have clothes in a machine." He stared at her for a second too long, then shrugged and sat again. I set my dryer for 32 minutes. My plan was simple. Stay inside until the clothes were dry, fold fast, and leave. My car was parked under the light right in front. I had pepper spray on my keychain, but it was buried somewhere at the bottom of my purse, because of course it was. At 11:20, another customer came in. A young mom with a little boy asleep on her shoulder. She put a small basket of clothes into a washer and sat near the door. The man watched her too. Then he got up and left. I felt my whole body relax. He walked out the front door and stood in the parking lot for a minute. I pretended not to watch, but I could see his reflection in the glass. He crossed to the dark side of the strip mall, near the closed tax office, and disappeared around the corner. Rosa locked the bathroom door behind the counter and said, mostly to herself, "Nope." I said, "You know him?" "No." The young mom asked, "Who?" Rosa said, "Nobody." "You're good." But she didn't sound like we were good. At 11:38, my dryers had 5 minutes left. The mom's washer was still going. Her little boy was awake now and eating crackers out of a plastic bag. I went to my car to plug in my phone, because I had a charger there. I almost asked Rosa to walk with me, but I felt embarrassed. It was maybe 20 steps. The parking lot was lit. I could see my car the whole time. I stepped outside. The air smelled like hot pavement and dryer vents. The strip mall was quiet except for the buzz of the laundromat sign. I unlocked my car, leaned in, plugged in my phone, and saw something on my passenger seat. A folded piece of paper. I did not leave paper there. I kept that seat empty because my car was already messy enough. For a second, I thought it might be a flyer someone shoved through the cracked window, but my windows weren't cracked. I picked it up and opened it. It was one of the laundromat receipt slips from the little machine near the counter. On it, written in block letters, were the words, "You forgot dryer 14. Dryer 14 was mine." I looked up. The man in the black jacket was standing near the corner of the tax office, half behind the building. I didn't scream. I didn't run right away. I just froze in that awful way where your brain is still trying to make it normal. Maybe he found the slip. Maybe he put it on the wrong car. Maybe he was messing with me. Then he took one step out from the corner. I slammed my car door and ran back into the laundromat. Rosa looked up fast. What happened? I locked the front door behind me without asking. The mom pulled her son close. I handed Rosa the paper and said, "He put this in my car." Rosa's face changed. She went to the window and looked out. The man was walking across the parking lot toward the laundromat. Not running. Walking. Rosa said, "Back room." "Both of you." The mom said, "My clothes." Now, there was a back room behind the counter where they kept mop buckets, lost clothes, and boxes of detergent. Rosa held the counter flap open and waved us through. I grabbed my purse and the mom grabbed her son. We went behind the counter just as the man reached the front door. He tried the handle. Locked. He looked through the glass at Rosa. She stood behind the counter with one hand under it. Later she told me she had a metal pipe there because the owner wouldn't pay for security. The man tapped the glass with one finger. Rosa said through the door, "We're closed." He pointed at the dryers. Rosa said, "Come back tomorrow." He smiled and held up something small. My phone. I had left it plugged into my car. I felt heat go through my face. Not fear first. Shame. I had made one stupid move, and he had my phone. He put the phone against the glass like he was returning it. Rosa said, "Put it down." He didn't. He pointed at me. The mom whispered, "Oh my God." Her little boy started to cry, and she covered his mouth gently, not to hurt him, just to quiet him. The man leaned close to the glass and said something. We couldn't hear him. Rosa yelled, "Leave." He didn't leave. He walked away from the front door, slow, toward the side of the building. Rosa turned to us. "There's a back door, but it opens to the alley. We are not using it unless we have to." The laundromat had big windows along the front and cinder block walls on the sides. The back room had no window. Once we were in there, we couldn't see what he was doing. That was worse. Rosa called the owner first. He didn't answer. Then she called the police from the laundromat landline. She gave the address and said, "A man is trying to get inside after following a customer." The dispatcher kept her on the phone. I stood next to shelves of detergent, listening. Then the lights went out. Not all of them. The washers and dryers kept running for a second, then clicked off too. The whole place went dark except for the emergency sign glowing red over the back door. The little boy started crying harder. Rosa whispered, "Breaker box is outside." The man had cut the power. That sentence landed in my head slowly. He had been there before. He knew where it was. He knew the layout. He knew the back alley, the machines, probably the cameras too. In the dark, we heard the front door handle again. Then a thump. Then another. The glass didn't break. It was thick, probably because that area had break-ins. But he was testing it. Rosa told the dispatcher. He shut off the power. The dispatcher said something I couldn't hear. Rosa said, "We have 2 customers and a child." The banging stopped. For a few seconds, there was silence. Then we heard the back door handle move. Right behind us. It was a heavy metal door in the storage room, the kind with a push bar. It had a deadbolt above it. The handle jerked once, then twice. The mom made a small sound. Rosa raised the pipe. The man knocked on the back door. 3 soft taps. Then he said, calm as anything, "I have her phone." Nobody answered. He said, "She left her car open." I could hear him breathing through the door. Not heavy. Not excited. Just close. The dispatcher must have told Rosa to stay away from the door because she whispered, We are. Then the man said my first name. Michelle. I hadn't told him my name. Rosa hadn't said it. The young mom didn't know it. My work badge was in my car, clipped to the visor. He had gone through my car. He said, "Michelle, come get your phone." That was when the mom grabbed my wrist. Her hand was cold and strong. She didn't say anything, but she held on like she was keeping me from moving, even though I wasn't going to. Then we heard another voice outside. A man's voice, louder and deeper. "Hey, what are you doing back there?" The person at the back door went silent. The new voice said, "I'm talking to you." Rosa whispered, "The pizza guy." There was a pizza place across the street that closed at midnight. A delivery driver was standing at the alley entrance with his headlights pointed straight down the side of the building. We couldn't see him, but we saw the light suddenly cut under the back door. The man at the door moved away fast. The delivery driver shouted, "Get out of here!" Footsteps ran on gravel. Rosa yelled into the phone, "He's running toward Cedar." The driver banged on the back door. "You okay in there?" Rosa yelled, "Stay there. Police are coming." The police didn't arrive in time to catch the man. They came a few minutes later, checked the alley, took statements, and got the power back on. My phone was found on top of the electrical box outside. The screen was cracked. My car door was open, and everything from my glove box was on the passenger floor. My work badge was missing. That part scared me almost as much as the rest, because it meant he didn't just want my phone. He wanted something with my full name, my face, and where I worked. The officers asked if I knew him. I said no. They asked if I had seen him before. I said not that I remembered. Rosa told them he had come in twice earlier that week. Once he bought a water and left. Once he asked to use the bathroom and got mad when she said no. He never brought laundry. The owner showed up around 12:30, annoyed at first, like this was bad for business. Then Rosa made him pull the camera footage. The footage didn't show everything because the power went out, but it showed enough. It showed the man coming in 40 minutes before me and sitting down with no bag. It showed him watching every woman who came in alone. It showed him walking near my washers and looking at the machine number. It showed him leaving, then coming back while I was moving clothes, standing outside by my car. The angle didn't show him breaking into it, but it showed his shadow at my passenger side for almost a full minute. The camera also showed him messing with the breaker box outside earlier in the night, just for a second, like he was checking it. He didn't improvise all of it. He had a routine. The police took a report. They dusted my car, but I never heard about a match. My badge was never found. My manager at the dental office had me park near the front for a month and changed the staff door code. Rosa told me later the laundromat owner finally put a lock cover over the breaker box and stopped staying open until midnight. She quit not long after. The delivery driver's name was Marco. He had been across the street, waiting for his last order to finish, and saw the man go around the laundromat after the lights went out. He said it looked wrong, so he drove over with his high beams on. That was it. No big hero moment. He just paid attention when most people would have kept driving. I think about that a lot, because Maple Wash was public. There were cameras. There was a counter. There were bright lights and vending machines and a big glass front. It looked like the kind of place where nothing too bad could happen because help was right there. But help is not the same as safety. Not until someone notices and acts. I stopped doing laundry at night after that. I saved for 2 months and bought a used washer from Facebook Marketplace, even though it leaked the first week. I stopped leaving my work badge in the car. I stopped wearing headphones in parking lots. I started telling cashiers and workers when someone made me uncomfortable, even if I felt awkward. The hardest thing to explain is how ordinary the whole night felt until it didn't. A man sat in a chair. He bought water. He waited. He learned who was alone and who wasn't paying attention. There are people who use public places like nets. They don't need darkness. They just need everybody to assume somebody else is watching. I checked into the motel because it was $40 cheaper than the chain hotel by the interstate. That is the honest reason. I was 32, a medical billing clerk from Louisville, driving alone to St. Louis for my cousin's baby shower, and I had already spent more money than I wanted on gas. I was tired, still dealing with a divorce that had made me weird about asking people for help, and I wanted to prove I could travel alone without making it a big deal. The man at the front desk slid me a key card for room 214 and said, "Second floor, all the way left." When I got to the room, the door wasn't closed all the way. Not wide open. just not latched. The motel was in southern Illinois, right off a highway exit with 2 gas stations, a diner, and a lot of empty fields behind it. It had outside doors and a balcony walkway. The kind of place where every room faced the parking lot. It was around 8:30 at night, but in late October, it already felt later. The air was cold. The ice machine was humming near the stairs. A couple argued quietly in the parking lot while unloading a truck. I stood outside room 214 with my suitcase handle in my hand, looking at the thin black gap between the door and the frame. I should have gone straight back to the office. I know that now. But I was exhausted. I had driven 6 hours after work. My back hurt. I had a headache from gas station coffee. And part of me thought the cleaner probably didn't pull the door hard enough. Motels are like that sometimes. Cheap places have loose handles and old locks. So I pushed the door open with my shoe. The room smelled like bleach and old carpet. The lights were off. I reached in and flipped the switch. 1 bed. 1 little table. TV bolted to the dresser. Bathroom sink outside the bathroom. Nothing looked disturbed. I left the door open while I checked behind the shower curtain, under the bed, and inside the closet space, which was really just a metal bar with 4 hangers. Nobody was there. I shut the door, put the deadbolt on, and slid the chain lock across. Then I stood there for a minute, listening. The room was quiet except for the heater clicking. I texted my cousin, made it. Cheap motel but alive. She sent back, lock your door LOL. I took a shower, changed into sweats, and sat on the bed eating pretzels from a gas station bag. I was too tired to go find real food. Around 9:10, someone walked past my door. That wasn't strange. It was a motel, but they walked past slowly, then stopped. I looked at the bottom of the door. I could see the shadow of shoes blocking the light from the walkway. I waited for a knock. No knock came. The shadow stayed there. After maybe 10 seconds, it moved on. I muted the TV. The footsteps went to the end of the balcony, then came back. Same slow pace. Same stop outside my door. This time, a card slid into the lock. The little green light blinked. The handle moved down. The deadbolt caught. My body went completely still. A man outside muttered, "Come on." He tried the handle again, harder. I got off the bed and back toward the bathroom sink. The chain lock rattled as the door pushed inward a fraction of an inch. Then he stopped. A second later, he knocked. "Front desk," he said. I didn't answer. He knocked again. "Ma'am?" "Front desk." The voice sounded like the man who checked me in. Maybe. Through the door, with the TV low and my own heartbeat in my ears, I couldn't be sure. I said, "What do you need?" "There's an issue with your card." "What issue?" "System didn't save it. I need you to come down and swipe again." "I'll come in the morning." "It has to be tonight." "Why?" He paused. That pause was too long. Then he said, "Manager needs it." I looked at the phone on the nightstand. Old motel phone. I picked it up and pressed 0. It rang and rang. No answer. The man outside said, "Ma'am, I'm not opening the door." He sounded annoyed now. "I'm not asking to come in. I just need you to walk to the office." "I'll call the office." "You can't. Phone's been acting up." I was still holding the receiver, listening to it ring. Then the front desk picked up. A woman said, "Office." I stared at the door. The man outside had stopped moving. I said quietly into the phone, "Hi. I'm in 214. Is someone from the front desk outside my room?" The woman said, "What?" "Someone's at my door saying there's an issue with my card." There was a small shuffle on her end. Then she said, "No, do not open that door." I looked at the gap at the bottom. The shoes were still there. The woman said, "Are you alone in the room?" I didn't answer because I didn't want the man outside to hear. She understood. "Stay on the phone," she said. "I'm sending my husband up." The man outside knocked once more, softer. "Ma'am, you need to come with me." I said nothing. Then the shoes moved away. I heard footsteps going toward the stairs, but they didn't sound hurried. They sounded calm. The woman on the phone said, "He gone?" "I think so." "Put something heavy in front of the door." I pushed the little table against it, then the chair. It wouldn't stop anyone, but it made noise. A minute later, I heard fast footsteps on the walkway. A different voice, older and angry, called out, "Hey!" Then nothing. The woman came back on the line. "My husband doesn't see anybody. We're calling the sheriff." I didn't want to stay in that room. Every part of it felt wrong now. The door that hadn't latched. The card in the lock. The man knowing I was a woman in there. The office phone acting up, even though it wasn't. The woman told me to wait for her husband, but I had a bad feeling about being trapped on the second floor. There was another door inside the room, near the bed. One of those connecting doors between rooms. I had noticed it earlier but hadn't thought about it. It had a deadbolt on my side and no handle. The deadbolt was locked. I walked over and touched it. It moved. Not open. Just a slight give, like the screws were loose. I bent down. There was a strip of duct tape over the latch plate, folded flat against the frame so it would not catch right. I stepped back. That door connected to room 216. I turned off the lamp beside me and stood in the dark. From the other side of the connecting door came a tiny sound. Not a knock, a scrape, like fingernail or metal on wood. I grabbed my suitcase and purse without thinking. I didn't care about the pretzels, the charger, the toiletries on the sink. I put on my shoes with no socks and looked through the peephole. The walkway outside was empty. I opened the door as quietly as I could, slipped out, and pulled it shut behind me. I did not let it slam. Then I ran. Not toward the stairs by the office. That was the direction the man had gone. I ran the other way, down the balcony to the far staircase. My suitcase wheels bounced and made a terrible sound on the concrete. I hated that sound. It felt like an alarm. Halfway down the stairs, a room door opened behind me. A man's voice said, "Hey." I didn't look back. At the bottom, I cut between two parked cars and headed toward the diner across the frontage road. It was maybe 200 yards away. There was traffic between us, but not much. I could see people inside the diner. Real people. Bright lights. A waitress wiping a table. A pickup truck in the motel lot started. Its headlights came on. That made me run faster. I dragged the suitcase until it tipped over, then left it. I ran across the frontage road with one shoe half off and nearly slipped on gravel. A semi honked at me from the highway ramp, long and angry. I reached the diner out of breath and pulled the door open, so hard the bell above it slammed against the glass. Everyone looked at me. The waitress said, "Honey." I said, "I need help. Someone is following me from the motel." She didn't ask me to explain first. She turned the deadbolt on the diner door and yelled, "Gary." A man from the kitchen came out holding a towel. He looked past me through the window. The pickup had pulled into the diner lot, but stopped near the edge, not in a parking space. It sat there with the headlights on. The waitress said, "You know them?" "No," Gary said. "Sit down where they can't see you." He took me behind the counter near the pie case, where I crouched on a little stool like a child. The waitress called 911. Gary stood at the door with his arms crossed. The pickup stayed for maybe 30 seconds. Then it backed out and left. No squealing tires. No dramatic chase. It just rolled away like someone deciding the night wasn't worth the attention. The sheriff's deputy came to the diner first. Then another deputy went to the motel. I gave my statement while drinking water from a plastic cup with both hands. The woman from the motel office came over later. Her name was Pat. She kept saying, "I'm so sorry." Her husband had searched the balcony and found room 216 empty, but the window was cracked open with the screen bent outward. Room 216 had not been rented that night. That was the first hard proof. The second came when the deputy checked the lock on the connecting door between 214 and 216. The latch plate on 214's side had been taped, exactly like I saw, so if the deadbolt wasn't fully thrown, the door could be pushed open from the other room. Mine had caught, but barely. The third proof was the key card. The man had used a real motel card, but it wasn't assigned to my room. The deputy said old cards sometimes still triggered the reader light even when they didn't unlock anything. The green blink didn't always mean access. It could just mean the reader recognized a card type. I hated learning that. I hated that the sound and light of something almost working had been part of the fear. Pat checked the log and said nobody from the desk had gone to my room. The man who checked me in had left at 8, and Pat had taken over at 9. She said she didn't know who the man was, but she had seen a pickup parked near the back earlier, facing the rooms. She thought it belonged to someone in 108. It didn't. The plates on the pickup, according to the diner owner's outside camera, came back to a sedan that had been scrapped 2 years before. They never found the men. I say men because the deputy believed there were at least two. One outside my door pretending to be the desk. One in 216, or outside the window. Maybe the driver too. Nobody could prove how long they had been at the motel before I checked in. My suitcase was found near the stairs where I dropped it. Nothing had been taken from it. That almost made it creepier. It wasn't about stealing luggage. The room door being unlatched when I arrived was probably not an accident. The deputy said someone may have tested rooms before guests came in. Or the first man may have watched me from the parking lot and gone up after seeing I was alone. I asked why they would do that. The deputy didn't give me a movie answer. He just said, "Bad people look for easy situations." That sentence stayed with me because it was plain and true. I didn't go to St. Louis that weekend. My cousin understood. Pat refunded my room and paid for the charger and toiletries I left behind, even though none of it mattered. The diner waitress, whose name was Ellen, sat with me until my brother drove 2 hours to pick me up. I remember she kept bringing me coffee I didn't drink. For months after, I couldn't sleep in any room with an outside door. Hotels, motels, even my own apartment felt wrong if I could hear people walking past. I bought a rubber door wedge and one of those portable locks that travelers use. I check connecting doors now. I check windows. I call the front desk myself if anyone knocks. I don't care if I seem rude. I don't care if someone sighs through the door. I also stopped treating cheap as harmless. I'm not saying expensive places are always safe. They aren't. But that night taught me that saving $40 can put you in a place where the locks are old, the staff is tired, the cameras face the wrong way, and strangers can learn your room number just by standing outside. The scariest part was not the man at the door. It was the connecting door, the quiet scrape from the room that was supposed to be empty. Because until then, I thought the danger was trying to get in. It was already next to me,